East and West Learning Connections.
Helps people of different cultures break barriers and connect with each other.
Together, let's make learning and connections happen.
Together, we make cross-cultural learning and connections happen.
The intention, given the fact that we have a limited amount of time this evening, the intention is to make this much more of an open forum and a question and answer. I'm really here for you. I've done a couple of entrepreneurial lectures for East and West so far, and they are archived, so you could go and certainly visit them. But what I'm really interested in, what Frank and I, we discussed, would like to do is really engage with the participants on this particular call in a mannerism that will lead you towards the path of success, whether you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or whether you are in early stages of an entrepreneur or even late stages of an entrepreneur. It's always good to have entrepreneurs talking to entrepreneurs because they can come up with all kinds of different ideas and help each other in terms of growing their businesses and their lives in general. So what I suggest is you've heard enough about me and my background. I started when I was 19 years old. I had a passion for audio and recording and went through this whole publishing, and it's a fairly lengthy story, but the end result was we sold out to Warburg Pincus, which is a very large private equity firm, probably the largest private equity firm in New York. And they acquired us through one of their satellite companies called Multiview. And we grew that company to almost $125 million. And then I retired in 2013 to help out early stage companies, and in particular also help my children where I could with their endeavors as well. So I'd like to firstly and foremost open this up as best I can. Perhaps those individuals who don't want audio could just mute themselves, and that the other ones who would like to ask questions or make comments, you can unmute yourselves. So I would suggest starting out tonight, and there's a lot of different topics I can talk on if you wish me to, but I'd love to answer your questions and find out what you as entrepreneurs are looking to do and what questions you have. This is your opportunity. This is your hour. So let me turn it over right away to a question and answer. And if there are any entrepreneurs here that are either looking to go into become an entrepreneur or starting into an entrepreneurial business, now's your opportunity to just go ahead, speak up, and start by asking your questions. Is there anybody who has an initial question?
Martin, nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so I just started my entrepreneurship venture because I was laid off 2 years ago and then started to think about what to do. And eventually I wanted to move towards to become a life and career coach for new immigrants, for especially people with immigrant background, especially women, because I see a lot of mindset difference between East culture and Western culture, and there's a lot of barrier that we can tackle that can allow a person to make their potential, realize their full potential. So that's what I wanted to do, and then eventually becoming an entrepreneur seems to be maybe also a solopreneur seems to be the first step. So I'm like, oh, this is what I'm doing now. So I have never thought about becoming an entrepreneur myself. So I was listening to some discussion, and so yeah, so whether it's so basically, okay, so I'm teaching myself to become an entrepreneur. So yeah, and my question is so you have a lot of experience in the corporate world and also business world, and now as a mentor. So you have lived in different stages, lived in different eras. So before the internet take over, and then the dot-com bubbles, and then the peak, the boom of the tech companies, and now it's the AI. So what's your take on the maybe on what we can do or what we can prepare ourselves when this kind of like highs and lows hit?
Excellent question. And in fact, I just finished a 12-module entrepreneurship program with a good friend of mine who owned a significantly large securities company, actually two of them. And one of the key points that we kept addressing was all the highs and the lows of an entrepreneur and how lonely a life it can be. It's really, really tough. It's not like you are, you show up for a job and you're given your job description and you kind of know what to do each day. All of a sudden, there's no rules, there's no regulations. It's just you're thrown into this as a result of whether it's COVID or whether you've lost a job. And sometimes these are the best ways, absolute best ways to get involved in business. In fact, you should embrace this opportunity. You should be passionate and love this opportunity. I believe that things are meant to be. Things happen for a reason. It's just my fundamental belief culturally that things happen for a reason. And I think that's what's happened for you. You said two very important things, actually three very important things I want to focus on and extract from your question. One of them was you decided to become a life coach. So the great part of that is what you're starting to do is to focus. And the most important thing is not to be all over the map. It's very, very important to pick a product or service and focus on it. And not only are you focused on being a life coach, you see a particular niche with women. And what a great opportunity it is for you as a life coach, particularly for women who are perhaps coming from another culture, not understanding quite what the opportunity is here. I think you've picked a great channel to go down. And I would encourage you to not shift your focus, not be all over the map, but focus as a life coach with a major emphasis on women, and particularly women who are experiencing a cultural change. And I think you could do very well. In terms of the highs and the lows, every day when you get up, it's tough. And you have to find your motivation. One of the key things is to make sure that you surround yourself with nothing but positive people. Always surround yourself with people that you aspire to be, because other people can really drag you down very quickly. And boy, if I had $1 for every time that one of my friends or associates or family members, whoever it might be, said, maybe this isn't for you, maybe it's not going to work out, I'd be a millionaire long before I was a millionaire. The fact is, you've got to surround yourself with very, very positive people. You will have ups and downs, but the key thing is that persistence and that dedication, and never accepting the word no, just never accepting it. If you believe that you can turn this into a business, I'm here to tell you, you can. You absolutely can. Your business will end up being what it is based on your attitude. That's what's going to determine your altitude. That's an old cliche from friends of mine from years ago. You will aspire to greatness if you just focus on the key elements of your business, which you've already outlined to us. And every day when you get up, just make it bigger, better, more important. Hang out with the right people. Get inspiration from the ones that you love, the friends that you care about, the people you respect. Hang out with the people who are successful, and it's amazing how you can become successful yourself. In terms of the highs and the lows that you alluded to, yes, definitively the toughest part is, and this is what I've said to my kids all the way along, is that the toughest part is the highs and the lows. So my advice to you is never make the highs too high and never make the lows too low. What you have to do is, if something great happens, remember the possibility that the shoe's going to drop tomorrow is there. So when you have something that's great, remember to celebrate it. Believe me, it's very important to celebrate your accomplishments, but at the same time, don't get overly passionate and overly comfortable with that celebration. Celebrate it for the evening, but remember tomorrow's another day, right? And so don't let the highs get too high. And when the lows get low, I can give you some advice. When things get bad, two things. Number one, it will never be as bad as you think it's going to be. and it will never be as good as you're going to think it'll be. It'll always be a hybrid. It'll always be somewhere in the middle. So when you get some really terrible news, chances are it'll never be as bad as it is. It also will never be as good as you want it to be. And it's the same thing with good news. It'll never be as great and it'll never be as bad. So what you want to do is try as best you can to moderate your temperament. Moderate that. Don't let the highs get too highs. Don't let the lows get too low. Stay right in that middle target zone so you stay balanced and focused. And every morning when you get up, I do something myself every morning I get up. It takes me about 30 seconds, and I give myself kind of an inspirational talk. Okay. And I've got it down to obviously key points, right? And my inspirational talk every single morning, first thing when I get up, I go over those points for about 30 seconds. I get out of bed and I get on with my day. Even if it's been a bad day the day before, the sun will shine tomorrow and tomorrow will be a better day. And I think you're going to do great.
Thank you.
Do you got those inspirational self-talk? Is that from someone or you made them?
I think a lot of it comes from my father, my mother as well. My father was besides being an entrepreneur, he was a philanthropic individual, very charitable, and also worked very heavily to bridge the gap between cultures. He focused a lot of his energy, time, and efforts to bring people of all walks of life, of all cultures together, as well as being an entrepreneur. He was a good spokesperson, much better than I, and a very, very well-liked man. So I think I take some of my inspiration from him. Some of what he had, I guess, rubbed off a little bit on me. But ultimately, I talk from my heart, and when I perform as an entrepreneur, I operate from my heart as well. And I think it's very, very important to have that passion in whatever you do, even with your children, Frank. It's important, because some mornings you get up and it's tough having 3 kids. I went through it as well. And sometimes you ask yourself, that question, but at the end of the day, you realize how lucky you are. And as I will tell everybody, putting entrepreneurship aside, as long as you have your health, you have everything, because your health is priceless. So it's really important to stay fit. It's important to exercise. All of this contributes to your success in being an entrepreneur as well. So that's another thing I can mention to you tonight. It's really, really important.
Like, how do you balance between you always meet people who say yes to you, never say no, but sometimes you need that no, you need that feedback. And sometimes maybe this path is not the best option. Maybe you should switch. So how do you balance that?
So your question really is, and are you talking about looking at, as an entrepreneur, looking at a business and whether it's time to sort of stay in the business or get out of the business? Is that where your question's leading to, or
or some strategies these strategies, I have a strategy, but it might not be the best. So right. You mentioned you hang out with only positive people who only say yes to you, but sometimes you need some frank feedback, right?
Yeah, and when I say hang out with positive people, the part that you've added there, which I would suggest to you that you might want to think about a little differently. I wouldn't hang out with successful people that always say yes to you. I would hang out with successful people, period, end. And whether they say yes to you or no to you, in fact, some of the best people that were part of my network were very successful people that would say no to me and would give me an honest feedback. So I think it's important to hang around very successful people, but not just what I would call yes people. I think you have to hang around successful people that also know how to tell you, hey, it's a great idea, but it's saturated. It won't work. It doesn't deal with today's economy. People won't want change as quickly as you think they might. So I would say to you that having a yes person around you is not necessarily the best thing, but certainly when somebody does believe you're right, it's important that they really support you with their yeses, but at the same time that you take the constructive criticism of no and understand. In terms of deciding, Young, which is I think another part of your question is, when is it time to sort of fold the cards and say, this isn't going to work? There's so many stories out there, and I won't get into any of them tonight because we only have, as I say, a limited time. But there's so many stories of people who are down to their last penny, and about to close their shop, and they hung in there and turned it into, $1 million businesses. And I think you've all heard those stories. So I think the time where you want to probably throw the towel in and look at something else is when you think that you've tried every possible avenue to make your business work. You've done everything you can think of. You've called every person that you can think of. You've got the support from as many people as you can. You've tried as many ideas. You've spoken with your staff. You've empowered your staff. You've listened to them. You collectively as a team have worked to try and get it. And it's just not happening. It's just not working. Sometimes it's because a disruptive force comes along. It's the old story is that if you were in the old days, if you were the driver of a horse and buggy, and all of a sudden down the street comes an automotive car, it's pretty daunting at that point. And that's at the point where you sit there and say, I don't think the horse and buggy business is going to be around too long, given that there's this new thing called an automobile that's on the same street as me. So I think sometimes when you see the light and you realize that the product you have is either too aged, you didn't change quick enough, or it just is not going in the right direction, there is a point in time where you have to say, okay, maybe I try something else. Remember that the most successful people in the world are the people who have failed the most. Failure and success are directly proportional. If you are not prepared to take risk and you are not prepared to fail, entrepreneurship is not for you. Period. End. So you really need to be in a situation where you're willing to risk all. You are willing to fail multiple times, and through failure is how you find success. And the other part of it is to go back to the original question this evening about the highs and the lows. Sometimes you get onto a high where things are going really great, money's coming in, things look wonderful, and you get very complacent. And that's a very, very dangerous zone. So I would suggest to all of you that every day that you get up, you set a new challenge. Do one thing, just one thing in a day that's uncomfortable to you. Do one thing that's uncomfortable to you. Take one risk every day that's a little uncomfortable to you, because when you become complacent, that's when businesses begin to fail. You think you've got the market. Great example was BlackBerry. I think you probably all remember BlackBerry prior to iPhone. They got very complacent. They had the market. They thought they had everything. And in less than a year or 2 years, basically out of business. The largest tech company probably in the world, out of business in 2 years. Kodak, if any of you remember Kodak, out of business in 2 years. They had 375,000 employees. They were gone in 2 to 3 years. So you can never be complacent. And I'll make one other statement. I didn't want this to be a lecture tonight, but I'll make one other statement. And that is, you must learn to embrace change. The greatest failure that I've seen in most companies is an inability to adapt to change. And interestingly enough, in my own industry, there was about 120 companies at the peak of my industry. There's about 120 competitive companies. And I can tell you, of the 120, only approximately 7 to 10, somewhere in that range, actually adopted to change. That meant 110 companies disappeared simply because they didn't want to change. They didn't want to go out there and do the work. And it's work. It's a lot of work. It requires a lot of energy to embrace change. And if you're willing to embrace change, then you can be you're already going to be in that 10% that has a chance at being successful. If you don't embrace change and you think you can do things the way you're doing them today forever, you're going to be out of business. Okay, it's simple. Other questions?
Yeah, I actually have an idea right now. I want to do it, and I already I'm writing my plans, but I probably don't have my own money to invest this business, so I'm not very sure if I can make it happen. Another thing is my background, all my experience told me that I'm not good at dealing with money. So if I got somebody get interested in my business, so I should be responsible for their money. But I don't know what's gonna happen in the future. So that's my concerns.
Great question, and it leads us into this. Leads us into a discussion about strengths and weaknesses. So, if I understand correctly, you feel a certain weakness in terms of management of money, and also a concern, which is very nice actually. You have a concern that if somebody else were to invest their money in you, you're concerned about that responsibility of delivering success to them based on the fact that they're investing in money. So let me start by saying this to you. Number one is nobody is great at everything. They just aren't. And sometimes, not sometimes, but in business all the time, what you need to do is surround yourself with the best possible people you can get. Now, whether that's in the format of a partner or whether that's in the format of staff, which you may or may not be able to afford, whoever you hire or whoever you partner with, it has to be the absolute best that you can get. Now, I will say this to you, and this is an interesting thing about my own partnership and in the beginning days. If you choose somebody as a partner that's exactly like you, that's like mathematically taking 1 and 1 and trying to make it into 3. It doesn't work. It's impossible. So all you're going to get, if you find somebody identical to yourself, all you're going to get is more of yourself, right? So if you choose a partner and they have the same strengths and the same weaknesses as you, 1 and 1 might best equal 2. Having said that, if you find a partner that has different strengths, and in fact, your weaknesses are their strengths and your strengths are their weaknesses, that is a case where 1 and 1 can equal 3, right? That's how you can beat the mathematical formula. So the first thing you need to do is part of you going into business is to convince somebody else to invest money into your idea. And hopefully, that person, their strengths and weaknesses will be quite different from yours. As an example, they might be a really good financial person, and you might be really a good ideas or graphic person or arts person. And the combination of the two of you, if you put it together, can lead to 1 and 1 equaling 3. So the first thing is you need to convince the other person to invest. And the second thing is, all you can do once you convince that person is work your heart out and give it all your passion to make it successful. The only thing you can do for that person to be responsible to them for the money that they're investing is to do the best that you can. Be the best that you can. And I think if you end up being the best that you can, I think you'll be successful. But you can't give up. You've got to be persistent. You've got to be persuasive. No is not an option, and win is the only possible outcome for you. And if you believe that in every single day and work with this other person, not only will you be responsible to them for the money that they've invested, they will be very, very appreciative of the fact that you've been able to take their money and make a lot more money. So that's the other side of the coin, is what happens when you do take their money and you double or triple or quadruple it. Can you imagine what that looks like? Can you imagine what that feels like? That's what you need to get into your head. Not what happens if we don't succeed, but what happens when we do succeed. And when you begin thinking like that, and how much you can do for that person in terms of their investment, it will change probably the way that change your thinking and change your outcome, I think. Does that help you at all?
Yeah. Thank you. Another concern is I'm not very sociable person. So networking is a kind of a challenging thing for me. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I will try.
Here's a good thing. I mean, a couple things. When you're not necessarily good at something, you have two options, and really there are only two options. You try and practice and become good at it, or you find somebody else who is, right? And whether it's your partner, your investment partner who might be sociable, maybe they would become the sociable side of your business. And if not them, some of the other options are, there are a lot of really, really good young people out there today that are in their, early 20s, mid 20s, looking for an opportunity. Maybe they have a job where they're working virtually from home that's only part-time. And there are a lot of young people that are very sociable, but they don't have many other skills. But social media, etc., is a huge skill set for them because they grew up with it, they understand it, they live it every day, and they're probably using it every day, 12 hours a day. So the idea would be is, could you convince a young person to maybe come in, and because maybe you're just getting started and can't afford them, where would there be an opportunity to put them on commission and say to them, look, you're working from home, you're doing 10, 12 hours, doing whatever you're doing. Do you have some free time to go on social media and to promote my business or product, my service or product? And if you do, and we're successful, I will pay you from the revenue that we come in. And then if that happens, and all of a sudden it starts to work really well, what can happen from that is this person may end up gaining a full-time job from you. And it never cost you anything at the beginning. They've actually created their own job. And by the way, I've done this, and it's worked very successfully. So they end up actually with getting their own job, their own career in your business. You end up having an employee who you thought you couldn't afford because now you can afford it because of their efforts. Everybody wins. So another way of doing it is to look for youthful people. If you're talking about social media, as I say, they're usually very good at it and usually on it anyways. The other thing you can do is look for people who are influencers at the beginning stage of being influencers. So they're not expensive, but they will help you. So people who typically have a following of 5,000, 10,000 people, not millions, but people who have 5,000 or 10,000 people that as an example would be that their audience would be terrific for your product or service. So you can approach them and say, hey, look, you're an influencer. You have 10,000 people that would be great potential clients for me. Is there any way that you could help me promote my product to your people? I can't pay you right now, but if the revenue comes in, I'm happy to do a revenue share with you. So that's another way you could do it, is by using influencers. Does that help at all?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Other questions?
Could you provide advice how the initial steps could take to begin her entrepreneurship journey?
Sure. So one of the first, and this has been around since days immemorial, is one of the very, very first things you want to do is to create a business plan. It doesn't have to be 100 pages long, but typically it should be at least several pages long. And what you want to do is, first and foremost, I would challenge anybody, is to create a mission statement and a vision statement. So those are the very first two things, Frank, is number one is a mission statement. The second thing is a vision statement. Let me explain the differences between the two. I'm sure a lot of you know the difference, but for those that don't. So a mission statement basically it answers the question, why are you doing this? Why? So as an example, if you were building, long before the computer days. If you thought you came up with this idea of a computer and your mission statement is, I want to put a computer on every business desktop in the world. That could be a mission statement, okay? Your mission statements are normally very short. They're typically a sentence long. In the old days, if you look back to Winston Churchill, in his day, his mission was to win the war. That was his mission statement, right? So a mission statement could be very short. It's, why are you doing this, all right? And in the case of our previous question, our life coach, it could be, it could be to help culturally challenged, women develop a better lifestyle and a better life learning, period. That's what, a mission statement could be for that type of business. So you have to look to the business, decide what it is you want to do, and state it typically in a sentence or less. Some mission statements are 3 words, right? So you have to state it. Now, what is a vision statement? Equally difficult to do, but usually it's more like a paragraph long. A vision statement is more or less based on that product or service. Where do you see that going, let's say in 3 to 5 years from now? So as an example, I want to create, if this was 1980 and I came across this thing called a computer, a mission statement could be, is I want to create a computer to make computing and writing easier. That could be the mission statement. And the vision statement would be, is once I develop this computer, I want to put one of these on every desktop in the entire world. That's kind of the vision statement, right? So creating a mission statement initially, followed by your vision statement, and then you work from there to create a business plan. And the business plan would include things like, A, how are you going to finance this? What are the roles and responsibilities of the various individuals? If it's just you, it might be your roles and responsibilities. What are you going to do on a day by day? What's your market? Are you looking at what's the product you're looking at? Are there verticals, which means are there other products that are vertical to this product that you could introduce within that marketplace? What is the geography of your product or service? In other words, if you start selling this product in Canada, is it the type of product that you can then sell in Australia or New Zealand or Japan or China or somewhere else in the world? So there's the geographic expansion, there's the vertical expansion, there's also the product and services expansion. All of those things are things you need to look at in terms of where do you think you want to go with this business. But again, I go back and I caution you, focus, focus, focus. Because what you want to do is be really, 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 really good. Be the best at something rather than sort of adequate at a bunch of things. And most people, when they start their business, one of the fundamental mistakes they make is customer calls up and says, hey, I see that you make coffee cups. And you say, yeah, we're in the business of making coffee cups. And then the next question is, can you also bake cakes? And the person, because they're a small entrepreneur at the other end, says, well, up until now we couldn't, but since you're asking, now we can, right? So that's the fundamental mistake. Just because a customer comes and asks you for something doesn't mean that the answer is yes. That, going back to Young, what you asked about the word no, that's where as a business you turn and say, no, that's not what we do. We make coffee cups, but we are the best people in the world at making coffee cups. Stick to what you do well. Focus. If you look at a company, look at all the companies in the world, but I always tend to use this as an example. If you look at Apple, and I were to say to you, on this call today, how many products do you think Apple has? Now, some of you will say 5, some 3, some will say 25. But the correct answer is probably 3 to 5 products, real products, because you look at a phone, maybe an iPad, although an iPad's really just a big phone. But really, they've got a phone, they've got a computer, maybe AirPods, a watch. They've got a few things. Now think about this: the largest company in the world has 3 or 4 products. 3 or 4 products. That's it. But the difference is they excel in each and every one of them. They are the best of the best, and they try as best they can to innovate each year. Now, I will say that it's getting to the point with that company in particular. There's two things you can do with a company. You can innovate and you can revolutionize, okay? I always look today, and I'm encouraging early stage companies or young entrepreneurs, I always look for something called a disruptor, okay? So if any of you on this call aren't in a business, but you're looking to go into a business, I will challenge you right here, right now, to say to you, what can you think of that can disrupt a business? What can you think of that can disrupt the business? Be a disruptor. So if something's being sold a certain way and you can figure out a way to do it faster, cheaper, better, that's the best approach. That's the best place to start. Best place to start is look at what somebody's doing and saying, you know what? I think I can do that faster, cheaper, better. And I'm going to work my heart out to try and figure out how to do that. If I have to bring in a partner, if I have to go to an incubator and go through an incubator and find other like people that want to work with me, 3 or 4 other people, we're going to develop a product or service that's going to be faster, cheaper, better. Okay, so that's another way. Then you become a disruptor. So the iPhone, as an example, became a huge disruptor to BlackBerry. Huge in that they put them out of business in 2 years. But the problem is, it's great to be a disruptor, but then after that, what's the next thing you're going to do to revolutionize your product, right? What's the next thing? And they did it for a while, but after a while, it gets very difficult to become revolutionary, because now when the new iPhone comes out, which it just did, I guess, yesterday, it's not that exciting anymore. It's not like when the iPhone 2 or 3 or 4 came out and there were major changes. Now they're struggling even just to innovate right now. So a company like that, as big and as great as they are right now, in my opinion, they're in a vulnerable position. They're going to start to be in a more vulnerable position if they don't do something pretty revolutionary pretty soon. There's only so many years that you can come out and say, oh, it's smaller, it's thinner, it's lighter, it's bigger. There's only so long you can do that. And eventually someone's going to come along and say, hey, we've got the invisible phone. You don't even have to have a physical product. It's just, we're going to put like Elon Musk is doing, we're going to put a chip in your head and there's your new computer, right? You don't need an iPhone anymore. And it could shut down Apple tomorrow. So they're at a point now where they're not revolutionizing, they're innovating, but not at a great level. So they're going to become a bit vulnerable. Other products and services, other companies are doing fantastic, but think about, what is it you can do to disrupt an industry? What is it you can do? And you would be very, very surprised. It does not take billions of dollars. It does not take, Wall Street, New York Wall Street. Some of the best ideas come out of the basements, the garages where kids are working at. They just think of, hey, I think we could do that faster, cheaper, better. And they start and they grow it. And all of a sudden they become this huge disruptor. They revolutionize a product or service, and bang, they become the next Apple or the next BlackBerry or whoever it might be. So that's how I would get started. Mission statement, vision statement. Think of something that's a disruptor. When you think of it, focus on that product as a solo product. Be the best at it. Don't start to think about offering 400 different products and services. Just be the best at one thing. And then, as I said earlier, find the disruptor. Then you start, when you drill down the hierarchy, then you start to look at, okay, now we've got this disruptor, we've got a mission statement, we've got a vision statement. Now you start to look at, where can we place this product or service? Where's the market? Is it municipal? Is it national? Is it provincial? Is it international? So you start to look at it from a geographical perspective. You look at it, again, vertical. Say, if we do develop this product, if we develop the iPhone, is there a place for the AirPods? Is there a place for a Mac computer? So you do look at product number 2 or 3, but don't go too far on your verticals, just 2 or 3 over. That's the way that I would get started. Hopefully that helps.
On the way home today, I met my neighbor. They are doing a startup. It's U of T prof and his wife. They're doing compression technology to the storage. they hired a CEO. A CEO said this business become really vulnerable. The whole industry could disappear altogether. So they are looking for diversify. That's when you're doing something solo, you focus something. But here comes, you might see the danger. What do you do?
So I think, Frank, that's a great point. You're looking at compression technology. It's compression technology has been ongoing, since, well, forever really, but it really came into its fray probably in the early 90s when they started compressing things to disk and then to chips, and it's evolved from there. So yeah, it's vulnerable on one hand, and it takes a lot of money on the other. So that might be an industry where you sit and say, hey, we've got this compression technology, but that's a place where you probably need to partner with a significantly larger company. That's where I would take it to a couple of bigger players and say, hey, look, we've developed this, and you can do this under a non-disclosure. Have the conversation and say, we've developed this technology. We think it's amazing. And you go to a couple of big players and say, we'd like an audience, and we want this done under non-disclosure. And maybe it's an immediate sale and an immediate payout. So that's one possibility. When you talk about diversifying, it depends. If you're in compression technology, the question is, what are you going to diversify to, right? So again, where are you going to go with it? What's the mission? Like, what are you going to do? Where do you see it in 3 to 5 years from now? And how are you going to take it to market? Right. So these are the questions that these people will be facing. And like I said at the very beginning as well, you have to be accepting of change. If you are adverse to change, entrepreneurship, it's not for you. Stay in a job. It really is. And there's nothing wrong with staying in a job, right? Entrepreneurship requires this engagement of really accepting and adopting to change. So right now, if they're seeing that change is taking place that potentially could make this obsolete, well, in that statement, there's an opportunity. But they're not hearing the opportunity because they're not listening to themselves. What's the opportunity? Well, if this thing is going to become obsolete and blow up, what's it going to be replaced by? What is it? Is it AI? What's going to replace this? Why is it so vulnerable? And if it is vulnerable, understand what the vulnerabilities are. And that's where you can take the opportunity to say, what's going to blow it up? And I would argue, why can't you be the person to blow it up?
That's a very good point. Yeah. I will tell the couple next time I meet them. Yeah.
I'm happy to. They can call me if they want.
Yeah, Lord has quite a number of success. Amazon and some other things are their users, but that's a lot of time you find I would call it teenager startup, or the innovator who had an idea no longer has expertise to manage the company.
Right.
Then the external, a lot of time is American, come to Canada to manage a startup. Right. So that's where trouble starts. I've met a number of things because the culture, everything, and the vision difference.
Well, there's great examples of that all over the place. Again, I won't. That could be a whole other lecture another day. But it's amazing the number of American companies that have come to Canada and failed. And I'm going to put the failure rate somewhere around 80, 90%. Look at what happened with Target when they came to Canada. And boy, I wish they would have called me, because I've never seen such a large corporation make such a foolish mistake. They basically made every mistake you can make. Firstly, by assuming that they could, come into Canada and open 150 odd stores, which was ridiculous. I mean, they should have just opened one store and seen, how the market would go. They had the name, and they could have just opened one, tweaked it, figured out, made it right. Because they merchandised it wrong, they priced it wrong, they did everything wrong. It was a disaster, and they could have done things very right. And again, the stories are the list of Americans coming to the Canadian culture. Now, having said that, interestingly enough, and here's a great story for everybody on this call today: the number of Canadians that go to the U.S. it's almost inversely proportional, end up usually successful. And there's a reason for it, because if you can be successful in Canada, it's much more difficult to be successful in Canada. You're dealing with 10% of the population. So no matter what product you make, already your revenue is going to be 10%. So you have to be very, very good at what you do in terms of running your business to be able to be profitable and successful in Canada. You have to be so good here that when you go to the States, the crazy part of it is you don't have to be as good. And by the way, that's exactly what happened to me. I'm not going to get into my story, but we started in Canada, and I guess it was 87. So that would be 12 years later, we went to the US. And when I went to the US, I found it incredibly easy to do business in our business because we were so good at what we did up here, because the only way to make money up here was to be really, really good at what you do, because of a much more limited population. Canadians don't buy quite the same way Americans buy. They need more time to digest the purchase. So culturally, when we went to the States, it was like, oh my goodness, these people are making decisions in 3 weeks, not 3 years or 3 months. And, and we could make the occasional mistake and didn't bother anybody. Up here, you made a mistake, you were like, it was horrible. So we went from our culture to their culture. So if you are able to develop a business in Canada, I strongly, strongly recommend you look as one of your next step geographically is going to the US. And I will almost in every case, in fact, I will say this, in every case of early stage mentoring that I do, it's one of my key suggestions is, first learn how to be successful on your home front. Do it here, make it work, make it great. Once you do, the minute you can, go to the United States and take your product or service there. Because the market is, as I say, is 10 times bigger. It's an easier market. Purchasing is a different culture. One other point, Frank, I wanted to make sure I'll get this in our time slot tonight. Is the other aspect of when selling a product or service is as best you can, because you mentioned, I think you mentioned Amazon at one point, and sometimes you develop technology for a company like Amazon or Home Depot or or Costco, and what ends up happening is you make that sale, let's say to Costco, and Costco becomes 85% of your business. Basically, they own you. So one of the things I would like to encourage everybody here, no matter what product or service you provide, as best you can. And this is a singular, probably one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. This did come from my father. Never let any customer be larger than 10% of your business, if you can. Now that's difficult when Costco comes along and writes you a check for $1 million, but as best you can, never let anybody, any customer become larger than 10%. And quite frankly, if you can keep them under 5%, it's even better. That way, nobody controls you and you control your market. So if you do lose a customer, any loss of a customer is bad, but if you lose a customer, it's really going to have very limited impact on your overall business. So again, as best you can, limit your largest customer to no more than 10%. So somebody, actually, I was doing a speaking engagement, and somebody then asked the next question, say, well, what do you do when a Walmart or a Costco comes along and offers you to do business and you say yes to it and they instantly become 50% of your business? What do you do then, right? Do you not take the business? So the answer to that question before anyone asks it is, yes, you take the Walmart or the Costco. But now that they're 50% of the business, your next job is grow the rest of your business so that 50% becomes 10%.
My question is about setting goals. So there's I think a book recently published called 10 times it's better than 2 times.
Right.
So basically it says if you aim for 10 times, if even you fail, you get like 5 times instead of 2 times. There's also people saying the goal has to be SMART, like the acronym, right? Realistic, measurable. And then like what's your take on setting goals as a business in a startup stage?
So I think setting goals are are incredibly important. I wouldn't say that the word I use, I wouldn't say it's the gospel, but it's very, very important to set goals. And the way that I force most of the startups that I mentor to actually set their goals, one of the ways I force them is financially. And so the first thing that I do is I make sure that they've got monthly reports coming in financially. And what I ask them to do, and I know I've got one company that's, you know, pretty small. I mean, they do about, actually, that's not really true. When I started with them, the year, almost to the date, they had their first year. They actually did under $10,000 in sales. So I started with them. The next year we did, I guess it was 50,000. And this year, which is their year 3, my year 2 with them, they're looking at about 375,000. One of the ways that we did this was in setting up your financial statements, as part of setting goals, setting up your financial statements is to make sure that in your profit and loss statement, you don't just have your sales minus expenses, gross profit, net profit. You don't just do, because that's what everybody does. What I force is I force the extra columns in your financial statement, which read budget with comparisons to last year. So as an example, I will have somebody say, okay, our budget for September is $25,000, okay? And then I will have a comparison to what did we actually do in September? How much did we do? Did we do 25 or not compared to the budget? And then I will have the comparisons of the budget and the actuals based on last year. And with those 4 metrics, I can very, very quickly tell whether the company financially, what direction they're headed in. And I force them to do it every single month. And when you discipline yourself to do this from a financial perspective, it is amazing. It is incredible because, as I said, when I started with them, I had a little spreadsheet that I set up for them just to do quick financials. And then once they got to about, I don't know, I think it was around 4.
Can't hear you.
I made a mistake. I tried to mute someone. I muted Martin somehow. Martin, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah, we can hear now. Sorry, just my computer a little bit glitchy. I just
okay, no worries. I'm not sure where I left off. I was talking about the importance in setting goals, and part of setting goals was I was talking about the financial aspect of setting goals. Then I'm going to talk about the other aspects. But did you hear about the financial? The way
comparison. Yeah,
comparison. So do that comparison. Have a budget, have an actual, and have a comparison to the year before. It's amazing when you look at those stats, those 4 metrics every single month. Really gives you a handle, and then from there, it forces you to say, hey, we only did 22,000 this month. We were budgeted to do 25. What failed, right? Then you start to look and analyze and say, well, a bunch of clients took a month off. They decided not to use our service because it was summertime and they felt they didn't have the audience. So a lot of our clients just took a break during August, and that's reflected. So at least we can figure out what the reason is, right? So that's one aspect. In terms of setting goals for everything else that you do, I think it's really, really critically important that, again, going back to the mission statement and the vision statement, because you do a mission and a vision statement for a reason. And by the way, you should revisit and analyze your mission statement and your vision statement at least once a year, if not more often. Things do change. And Frank, that addresses a little bit of your question earlier when you say, well, what happens if something looks like it's going to blow up, or all of a sudden AI comes into play. By the way, AI has been around for a lot. It's hot right now, but AI has been around for a long, long time. But it's interesting that it's just all of a sudden the new frontier today. But the fact is, if something happens, like all of a sudden, a chat GPT comes along and Microsoft invests millions and billions of dollars into this thing, and it changes the landscape. It's very important to look at your mission statement and vision statement to see how this new change will affect your mission and vision. In terms of goal setting, very, very important also to revisit your goals and objectives. But in answer to your question, it's very, very important to have goals and objectives. And if your goal, as an example, so aside from the financial statements for this one particular company, what I did is I sat down with them. I was in Dallas visiting with them. I guess it was back in May or June. And what I did was I said to them, okay, guys, you're at X dollars right now in revenue. What do you need to do to be at 2X that next year? What do you need to do to be at 3X? What do you need to do to be at 4X? What do we need to do? And it was very interesting when I asked the question, I kind of got this blank stare and kind of got this stare of, oh, we're not going to have that discussion, are we? I said, yeah, we're going to have that discussion. What is it that is going to take to double our business, triple our business, quadruple our business? What do we need to do? So when we sat down and we actually analyzed and figured out, firstly, what are the numbers we need? How many new clients do we need? How many new products and services not new products, but how many new sales of our product do we need? How many services are we going to offer? Because we currently offer 3. I said, and what are we focusing on? And it was a really interesting conversation. And between the morning and the evening, we determined that the service that they thought was going to be number 3 to expand their business by the end of the day became number 1. Okay, for a whole variety of reasons and discussions, it became number 1 because they realized that their profitability was actually a little more than what they thought it was than the other 2 services. And they also realized it was a lot easier to sell that service by using some ideas that we came up with during the day. Okay, so we set the goal of, besides financial, we set the goal to say, well, we want to sell these amount more business. And more importantly, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to have to make so many, we're going to have to do so much on social media. We're going to have to do so much in phone calls. We're going to have to do so much in email. And so we set up all these goals for them. And quite frankly, they are surpassing all of them. They're doing incredibly well right now. Again, I think they're going to go from 50,000 to 375,000 this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if we can get them over $1 million a year following. All of a sudden, they got $1 million business. And that's 2 guys, by the way, just 2 people. And they're going to have $1 million. And by the way, it's $1 million US. So it's like almost $1.4 million Canadian. And they'll have done that in about 3 or 4 years. And then I think from there, we can escalate that exponentially. I think because if we can scale the business, so that's my other, I won't get into that tonight, but scaling is a whole other conversation. But if we can then scale the business, I think we can very quickly go from $1 million to 3 to 5 in the year following, and maybe get them to 10, and then even to 20 to 25. And I think we could do that within 6 to 7 years. So Frank, sorry, back to you.
Yeah, so Lin Tian asked a question: to go profit or for profit or not profit for startup? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'll explain a little bit, Martin. I know this is over time. So I know this is not a very easy question for you because it's complicated. It's case by case, right? Yeah, so I'm just throwing my question there. I know there's another session. I don't know when is the next one, but I'll just briefly mention.
November.
Yeah, sorry, what's that, Frank?
Right now, September. In November, I can have it's our next session. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Frank was saying our next session is in November. Is that correct, Frank?
That's right. That's right.
Next session is November. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'll just briefly state my question then. I jumped into the more full-time entrepreneurship about 5 years ago, before the COVID. Actually, 4 years. That's when I started my company I set up my company and then did a pilot project doing a Montessori school. So I'm a Montessori teacher, focusing on early childhood education. So now I've been working in that intensively with a couple teachers, and it's home-based. So now the question is, I'm trying to adapt or evolve this whole model and expand, hopefully, into a center outside. But for-profit or nonprofit, this has kind of troubled me for quite a while. I just know the surface, the definition, and the basic concept. But I know some of the bigger schools are nonprofit or not-for-profit.
Right.
But they are still making profit.
Yes.
Yeah, but then us, this very little school business, most of us are private. So yeah, I'm trying to understand it because centers like Kumon, training centers, I haven't heard they're nonprofit. They are all for profit, right? So what's the cutting line? Like, what's the decision factors for you to think about?
Okay, so
those kind of things.
You've asked a question ironically enough, to which few can answer, because most people who are entrepreneurs have no knowledge of the not-for-profit or nonprofit. It's my lucky day and your lucky day, because actually, in my close to now 50 years of being in business, my entire clientele were nonprofits and not-for-profits. That's my clientele. That's my sector that I come from. So I have an immense amount of experience in that particular area. So not to necessarily keep everybody on this call for a greater amount of time, but let me just tell you a couple of very quick things. I'm happy to talk.
Thank you. Really appreciate this.
Talk to you if you want. You can just grab my number from Frank or Young, and I'm happy to talk to you offline as well at any point in the next few days. But there is a fundamental difference between a not-for-profit and a nonprofit to begin with. Most people confuse those two, but there is a difference between a not-for-profit and a nonprofit, and there's a big difference between a not-for-profit, nonprofit, and a for-profit company. My recommendation to you is probably going to be in a for-profit business. That would be my recommendation based on what I think you're doing. And if it is basically providing a service outside of what potentially the school offers, but providing an expertise that the school doesn't, between you and a couple of other teachers, and developing that and having a clientele of early childhood education, parents that are looking for something that maybe the school doesn't offer. Am I correct in terms of what you're trying to provide? Does that sound about right? Or?
Exactly. It's there are some new ideas in this business, to implement.
Stay away from not-for-profit and nonprofit would be my knee-jerk reaction. Without talking to you further, go into the for-profit. If you go into a not-for-profit or a nonprofit, first of all, the paperwork involved is immense. The accountability each year is immense. There are some distinct advantages of the nonprofit sector, in that you can take donations and you can issue tax receipts, right? So that in itself, sometimes you sit there and say, if you think that you're more of a charitable organization, that's you're doing you're providing these wonderful services for these children and helping them out, and that you think that you can have fundraisers and events, and people will support you and foundations will donate to you, and you can go to the government for subsidies and do all of these things and do some grant writing. If you think you can do all of that and that's what your business is about, it could be a very good business, because you can get a significant amount of money coming in because first of all, it's tax deductible for most people. So for them to donate to you, and then you can basically market your organization or association as an association that's doing something for the good of children, and therefore you should donate money to it. So that would be kind of one aspect if you want to go down that road. But the amount of paperwork, the amount of reporting you need to do, the responsibility, remember, you can't earn profit in a nonprofit. It's kind of funny, but you can't earn profit. You really can only earn revenue. The revenue has to be regenerated and spent in a certain amount of time. There's a whole bunch of rules and regulations, and I can actually introduce you to the top lawyer in the nonprofit sector in Canada. He's very, very good, hard to get a hold of, hard to get his time, but you could speak with him, I'm sure, for a few minutes. But it's a very strict controls. The for-profit, which is really what I would encourage you to do. I can just see it in your eyes and looking through the thing. The for-profit enables you to do what you want to do when you want to do it. You have nobody holding a gun to your head. You don't have to worry about writing grants. You don't have to worry about funding. You just have to worry about providing a great service and getting paid for it. And I'm getting the sense your type of business definitely, in my mind, fits into the for-profit sector. And I would encourage you, after we talk, I'd encourage you to go down that road. But what I'd encourage you to do with your associates is to get together and do do a proper business plan. And set your goals and objectives, decide what your mission is, decide what your vision is, decide what your specific products and services are, who you're going to market to, how you're going to market it, answer all of those questions. And I think you'll generate so much excitement. And my best guess is that you already have a tremendously good network right now that you can go out to between you and your associates, that you can go out there, start to really run this as a business, and I think you could do very well at it, while at the same time still helping all these children, which is ultimately one of your goals as well. So my knee-jerk reaction is for-profit, stay away from the other two.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that was a quick help. Thank you so much. It's very encouraging. I'll dig into it more, definitely.
Thank you for the information. Happy to have the call. Yeah.
I think we're over time, but Lee want to ask a question. I don't know if you are okay, Martin.
Sure, I'm okay if everybody else is.
Okay, so Lee's question is the last one. Yeah.
Okay,
Lee,
thanks.
Go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Frank. And Martin, you do a great presentation and give a lot of a great point and short comment.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, if we want to become as smart as you, how can we do? Like, we want to know, do you learn this from the book, or from MBA course, or from your partner, or from the people you social with? So can you share a little about that? Thanks a lot.
You know, it's an excellent question, and thank you for asking it. It's an emotional answer a little bit for me, because and again, you probably will have heard, any of you have heard me before on the East and West Learning, where I've been privileged to be able to do some sessions for you guys. It started out for me, at least, on the night of my 19th birthday, when very, very unfortunately, my brother, who was very successful at a young age, not as an entrepreneur, but in politics, he died of cancer at the age of 26. So the evening of my 19th birthday was spent saying goodbye to my brother who died of cancer. It had a huge impact on me. And the reason I'm telling you this story and sharing this is it's amazing what happens in life. Somebody earlier said, you know, I lost my job 2 years ago, and here I am finding myself as an entrepreneur. Things happen in life. I didn't expect my brother to die at 26. He did. And so what it did at that point is I was in first year university. Back then it was the equivalent of second year university in the US. And I was studying math, sciences, accounting. Can't remember what else, but I was basically into math, sciences, and accounting at the time, trying to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And then I experienced my brother's death, and it had a pronounced effect on me. And the effect was so incredible that I got very anxious, and I felt like I couldn't take the time to wait any longer to be educated in school. It was too long a path to spend another 4 or 5 or 7 or 8 years in school to then start my career. So I immediately at that time felt like I needed to find something, a business that I wanted to do. And my father at the time was speaking in Chicago at a conference, came back with this idea about publishing content for associations. And he knew it was something I probably would really like. And from that day was the day basically I started my business. And it was the only business, quite frankly, I've ever been in. And I started it, and I just would never say die. I would never let it quit. I just, persistence, perseverance, sweat, blood, tears, breakdowns. When you talk about highs and lows, you haven't seen highs and lows. I was the highest high and the lowest low. I remember sitting 20 years old, I think in the living room of my parents' home, looking at my mother saying, I want to jump off a bridge. I cannot handle this business anymore. And that was really how I felt at the time. And I remember the next day when I landed the largest client I ever had, thinking, what was I thinking yesterday? I want to be in this business forever, right? So highs and lows in entrepreneurship are very interesting. And then I learned over years to curve it. So the answer to the question is, if you ask me today, because sometimes my children, who are all very well educated, come back and say, Dad, do you ever wish you had stayed in school and life might have been different for you? And I look at them and I say, 100% no. Only because of my circumstances. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you to go get your MBA or to go to Harvard or go to any other university in the world to ascribe to the highest form of education you possibly can. I will tell you it's an excellent route to go, an excellent route. There's nothing better than education, okay? But at the same time, I went through the school of hard knocks. I self-educated myself. I was in a business that was all about dealing with motivational speakers. I was dealing with the resident experts in every field, in every possible field across the spectrum, whether it was psychologists, psychiatry, trucking, whether it was engineering, science, medicine. I worked with all these nonprofit, as we talked about earlier, tying this whole night together. I worked with all these nonprofit associations, and I became their publishing partner, and we captured the content from their annual conferences and repurposed it back to their membership. So I was working with the top doctors, the top engineers, the top scientists. So as a young man, my education came through these conferences. I didn't get to go to school to learn from the best professors. I got to learn from who the professors learned from. I got to the top experts in the world. So I got to know a little bit about everything over the years. So what do I encourage you to do? I encourage you to learn wherever you can. There's nothing like experience. That's the honesty. And that's something you can't buy. If you're 20 years old, I'm sorry, you can't buy experience, right? But experience is incredibly valuable. But in terms of just educating yourself, I would go online, look at the motivational speakers that are out there. In fact, again, not to promote anything, because I don't even know if we're going to sell this or give it away for free yet. I have no idea. But I just finished what I consider to be a great entrepreneurial course. And it was 12 modules long. It's about 6 to 7 hours worth of content. It should be finished in another, I'd say, month or two. And where we publish it, I have no idea. We did it just more or less so that we'd have a legacy. My friend, I don't mind sharing his name. His name is Joel Matlin, if any of you have heard of him. Joel Matlin was the owner, founder, and CEO of a company called Alarm Force. If any of you have security in your home, you may have heard of Alarm Force. Prior to that, he owned a company called Frisco Bay. Frisco Bay was the largest security company on the commercial side. So any bank that you used to walk into, their security was done by Frisco Bay. So Joel was first started Frisco Bay. He sold that company. By the way, that company became public. He sold that. He then started Alarm Force because he had a non-compete. So he went into the consumer side of security. He then started Alarm Force, became the largest alarm security company in Canada. As most of you know, that was sold. That also he took to be a public company. And he's now got a new project, and him and I have been friends for many, many years. And he approached me about a year ago and said, hey, you know, there's a lot of wealth of experience between the two of us. Why don't we do a 12 modules on everything you need to know about entrepreneurship? So we've just completed that. So I'm not pushing my stuff, but there's tons and tons and tons of stuff like that out there on the internet. A lot of it's free. So I would encourage you either to do one of three things. Self-educate, get on the internet, try and sort out the stuff that's really good. If you find somebody who you really, really like, follow them. See what they do. So much information today is free, and you can get most of what I'm saying on the internet. So one way is go through social media, go on the internet, self-study. Second way is if you are in school, stay in school, complete it, get your MBA, and even postdoctorate after that. Education always has its value. The third way that you can educate yourself is just through experience. Don't waste a second of your time. Don't get up, like we're going to end the conversation tonight. You all have to promise me that tomorrow morning, you're going to make every hour, every minute, every second count. Don't waste your time. Life is too valuable. You don't know what it's going to bring you tomorrow. Look what happened to my brother, 26 years old. He was a trustee for the Board of Education. He would have probably end up being the Prime Minister of Canada if he kept going. He was a huge politician back then. And don't waste a day of your time. Every second counts. Nobody on this phone call can tell me they're going to be alive at 5 o'clock tomorrow. I know it's a terrible statement, but the truth of the matter is not one person on this call can tell me they have a guarantee that they're going to be living tomorrow at 5 o'clock. You don't know if I might be the last person you're going to see on earth, right? You don't know that. There's no guarantees. Now, I'm not saying go out and sell the house and spend all your money tomorrow. But somewhere in between going out and pretending that tomorrow is your last day on earth and the way you're currently behaving, which is I have forever to live, somewhere in between there is the right answer. And I would encourage you all as you leave tonight to find that right answer in between. Make every day count. Make it valuable. Go out and find that business. Be the disruptor. Develop your mission statement. Develop your vision statement. Get your friends to comment on it. Do what Frank's doing. He'll say, hey, Martin, what do you think of this? And I'll say to Frank, hey, what do you think of this? And we'll go back and forth and come up with ideas but make your time count. And especially make your time count on a personal level as well, because life isn't just business. Make sure you balance it with your family and friends. It's a really tough thing to do, but whoever are your loved ones, and usually as I make this statement, you can almost always count your loved ones on two hands. You know that if anything ever happened to you, there's going to be 10 people or up to 10 people who are going to be really, really hurt. The rest are visitors. Go to those 10 people tonight. Go to them tomorrow. Tell them you love them. Spend time with them. Make sure they've got your message. Make sure they know how you feel about them. That's an important thing to keep your mind healthy so that you can keep your mind healthy for your business. So balance your business with your family and friends. Balance those two things as best you can, all right? But make every second count. That's if there's one message I have on entrepreneurship, it's make every second count. Don't sit around thinking about it. Go out there, as Nike says, go out there and do it. Do it now. There's no better tomorrow than tomorrow, right? So you wake up tomorrow, you guys should all be working on your business.
Can I share a quote? Learn and take care of your house. It's like you're going to live forever. But act, do things, and live to the extent that's like no tomorrow.
Frank, there's I'll leave you with this one last message. A friend of mine years ago, we were good. He wrote about 5 or 6 books, and I think what he did was he sat down with me and then he went and wrote a book. And I always said to him, you always are stealing my books, right? But a good friend of mine, Sam, wrote a book, and it's called, the title of the book is Execute or Be Executed. Okay. So it's a book you can pick up and read, but he wrote about, Sam Geist is his name, Geist. He wrote, I think, about 6 or 7 books, all based on entrepreneurship. They're good reads. They're, you know, they're not out of the world, but they're good reads. But the one title that I helped them with was Execute or Be Executed. And that's really what you have to think about. If you're not willing to execute, because execution is the key to everything in life. It really is. I can talk all night long. I can tell you what to do. If you don't execute, it's wasted breath. And that's why I tell every one of my mentees, the first thing I tell them when somebody sits down with me and said, hey, I'd like you to mentor us in our business. First thing I ask them is, you know, I ask them about execution. And I will usually give them a little test. And I'll say, you know what? Between now and the end of the week, you need to do these 5 things. And when they come back to me on Friday and said, you know, and they start with excuses, okay? Another little story. Sorry, Frank, I don't want to elongate this. But there used to be a company in Canada called EAWLC. EAWLC was in the clothing business, and they were a multi-million-dollar company. They owned Harry Rose. I don't know, I think they sold it all now, but they owned Harry Rosen's, which some of you have seen in the mall. They owned Tip Top. So they owned a bunch of the retail clothing stores in most of the major malls. They were a very big company. Anybody want to take a guess what EAWLC stands for? The initials DYLEX? Anybody know the answer to that? Well, I'll tell you what the answer is. EAWLC stands for, this is what it stands for, so don't shoot the messenger here, but this is what it stands for. Damn your lousy excuses. That's the name of the company. Damn your lousy excuses. So when people come back to me and I give them 5 tasks and it's Friday and they say, you know, I couldn't do this because I didn't feel so well. Well, that's a good excuse. But if someone comes back to me and says, you know, I made the phone call, I couldn't find the phone number, my internet was down. You know, when people come back to me with excuses and they don't execute, I won't take them on. It's very simple. Execute or be executed. If you're going to do something, if you say something, do something, right? Say something, do something. That's execution. And there is no excuses, right? Excuses are for the people who fall out of business, okay? Those are for the 99% of people that aren't successful in business. The only people who are successful in business are the people that execute and do what they say they're going to do. And that all goes, of course, with honesty, integrity, and a real caring for your customer, okay? Because if you don't care for your customer and you're not honest and you don't have an integrity, you may get away in the short run, but in the long run, you will always lose, always lose. Be honest with yourself, be honest with your customers, deal in integrity, deal with, and your reputation of integrity and honesty is extremely important. There's no shortcuts. Sorry, Frank, but let's finish up with that.
Let's wrap up today. It's really, we're getting what you have accumulated, the wisdom and the spirit for your, you know, the wealth of your experience. I'm really thankful. I will thank you on behalf of East West and everybody on the call. We have a next session scheduled in November. Please keep eye on your email inbox. Thank you. Martin, you have anything to add? Lian?
Yeah, Martin, you're so inspirational. Every time I listen to your session, and I got to know more about you. That's just wonderful. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you. And my inspiration comes from you and Frank by affording me the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure to be with all of you tonight. And hopefully I get to meet all of you at some point. And if anybody does want to reach out to me, by phone. There's no cost. I can't spend hours and hours, but I'll certainly spend a few minutes. If anybody does have any particular questions, if they want to reach out or they want some advice or some help with their network, anything like that, feel free to reach out with me. And I'm sure you can get my information through East and West Learning.
Thank you. We're happy to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
For inquiries, please contact info@eawlc.org or visit our website at www.eawlc.org.